Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's session, Industry Exchange, Building a Tech and AI Adoption Roadmap. My name is Kelsey O'Shaughnessy, and I will be your host for today, bringing our Industry Exchange Workshop series online. In this session, we'll deliver practical, repeatable strategies and a structured approach to evaluating, prioritizing, and sequencing technology adoption projects, which have been informed by what real Indiana AML companies have tried, including what worked and what slowed them down, as well as things they wish they knew before they started. Ultimately, this session focuses on how to thoughtfully build a tech adoption roadmap and how to define your first or next project. Let's start by introducing today's speakers. We'll be hearing from Conexus Indiana's own Justin Cruz, who is the Senior Director of Technology Adoption and Partnerships. He will be the one leading the discussions and content today. We're also grateful to be joined by some guest speakers to give their own tech and AI adoption insights. Our first speaker is Jessica Young, Chief Executive Officer of Simtech, Alex McKee, Vice President of Operations at Shields, and finally, Josh Davidheiser, the Chief Financial Officer from Indiana Oxygen Company. Before we dive in, a couple of quick notes. Today's session is being recorded. You're welcome to submit your questions at any time throughout the event using the Q&A feature at the top of the Teams meeting panel. This Q&A discussion will be running throughout the event, and we encourage you all to jump into the discussion and offer your own insights and experience throughout the session. During the session, we'll work through proven, peer-informed methods to anchor technology decisions, including emerging tools like AI to business outcomes, not tools, build credible ROI and total cost cases that leaders can act on, design pilots that are ready to scale, not just demonstrate, and place people at the center of adoption. With all of that, let's get started. Jay Wertz.
Thanks, Kelsey. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jay Wertz from Conexus. We think we've got a great program lined up for today, and just want to say a couple of things. In particular, thank you for everyone joining, all the attendees. We think we've got a really, really great crowd. And thanks very much to our guest speakers. We appreciate your insights and your time. A lot of the crowd is new to Conexus. So just a little bit about who we are and why we hold these events. So if you don't know Conexus, we advance manufacturing and logistics in Indiana. We do that primarily through focusing on increasing productivity, because lots of very positive things come when productivity increases, as we all know. We focus on a couple of things to do that. One is supporting technology adoption, which today is about, and the other is workforce development. We also put a particular focus on small and mid-sized companies. We serve all size companies from the biggest down to the smallest, but we do tend to put more emphasis on small and mid-size, which I think today fits that as well. Why do we do these? Again, we're trying to increase productivity and we're trying to increase tech adoption. And with this particular topic of building roadmaps for tech adoption and for AI adoption, through our meetings with people like you, through our surveys, through other sources of information, we found out this is a need to help build these roadmaps. So that's why the focus today. A couple other quick notes. This meeting today obviously is virtual. It helps us reach a broad audience, but we're also emphasizing getting all over the state with these meetings. The last one we had was up in Fort Wayne, obviously the northern part of the state. Prior to that, it was in Jeffersonville. So we're trying to get north and south and get all over to bring this information, as far and as wide as we can. Last note is we really want to encourage networking. A big, part of the value we bring is creating networks. So not only just getting to know each other a little bit, but we do encourage the networking where you use each other to ask questions and to answer each other's questions and develop that kind of network as well, where you can lean on each other to get thoughts, get insights, get questions answered, and all those kinds of things. So with that, I wish everyone a great event. Hope lots is learned and relationships are made. And with that, I'll turn it over to Justin.
Thanks, Jay. Before we get started, we also want to say a thank you to the Indiana Economic Development Corporation for sponsoring the event, the workshop series, and with them. We're able to do a lot of this programming that enables us to bring some of the lessons learned and feedback from our manufacturing and logistics constituents to more of a public-facing audience. So today we're going to go through what we're talking is the technology adoption roadmap and playbook. We're going to go through kind of 3 modules, but before that, do a little bit of the ground rules. So the way that we're going to work today, because we do have a large audience, we're going to be looking at everyone to kind of keep their microphones off, other than the speakers, but we do encourage chat. So as Jay mentioned, as Kelsey mentioned, we will be using the chat to kind of run through your ideas, what you're working on, and supporting each other through Q&A. Ideas to bring your own situation, what you're working on, how you view that challenge and what's been successful for you, and then share what's working when other people have questions. So being able to make this an interactive session as much as we can. Obviously, it's a little harder than it would be in person, but we want to make the best of it. Generally, we're going to do about 3 blocks. So it's going to be one of our guest speakers going through their experience, their organization, some Q&A throughout it, and then going into our 3 modules. So we'll have different sessions within today, focus in different areas within a technology adoption journey and building a technology roadmap. As Jay mentioned, it's a room full of different people from different organizations, large and small. We have some that are manufacturers, logistics, technology service providers, support organizations, academia, anywhere from owners, operators, executives, IT resources, engineering as well. So across the state, and we want to have a good experience and good interaction throughout the day. So the main 3 sections that we're going to go through today, one is going to be called more of the people-focused strategy. So thinking about how you organize your technology adoption strategy, outcomes first, people-focused, from there through value realization. So yes, there is elements of building business cases, but as well understanding how you can capture and report value beyond just the direct dollars. And lastly, start thinking about how you scale with discipline. So taking from the initial pilot to growing that pilot beyond, maybe it's a single cell, single line, and understanding how it incorporates with your longer technology journey. So with that, I would like to welcome Jessica Young, our first guest speaker today, to talk a little bit about Symtec and how you work and adopt and manage technology strategy at your organization.
Yes. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you to Connexus of Indiana for having us. I'm Jessica Young, and my husband, Jared, and I are the proud owners of Symtec. We are here today to talk about building a tech adoption roadmap, but to understand truly our roadmap, you kind of have to first understand where we started. So Symtec was founded in 1975 by Richard Pfeiffer, originally starting in Louisville, Kentucky, before making the move to southern Indiana, the sunny side, in 1992. Day one, the foundation of the company was built on a simple, powerful principle: do work that matters and do it the right way the first time. The company had incredible bones and a stellar reputation within the industry, which is why it was so appealing for Jared and I to jump onto the ownership in July of 2018. When we purchased Symtec, the company had 43 years of existence under its belt. It was a massive legacy to step into, but honestly, with any manufacturer, lots of room for improvement. We immediately aligned around a central mantra: family owned and team operated. Our vision for growth was clear, and as we expanded our capabilities in 2019 and beyond, we knew that to become the manufacturer that manufacturers rely on, we had to heavily invest in technology and in talent. But technology adoption isn't just about buying new software or machines. It's about creating an ecosystem. I want you to visualize a full circle, which is exactly our tech adoption journey and the approach. When we sat down to map out this journey, we mapped it out literally in the form of a circle, looking at how everything would impact one another to eventually continue that loop. You'll see in that overarching business vision for tech adoption that continuous full circle loop included 4 key points: the shop floor, quality control, customer output, and then the front of the house. On the shop floor, it starts directly with the manufacturing process. From a quality control standpoint, the technology must directly impact and elevate all QC processes, which then turns to our customer output. That quality translates directly into the output for each and every one of our partners. Then ultimately to what we call the front of the house. After that successful output generates the revenue, which impacts the financials, which then leads back to our shop floor. So you can see how that continuous loop is ever evolving. Looking back on our journey, we've learned a lot about what works and what we would do differently. Fail and fail fast, as we say. The tech adoption insights that worked. Focusing on site with hands-on work that builds real skills along new technology. We found lots of success in prioritizing things like a flex schedule to maintain our family first culture during heavy transitions. That impact was phenomenal because you think about how that full circle leads to the financial impact. It actually garnered additional output because of that flexibility that we offered. We also looked at what we could have done differently. Holding each other, our teammates, accountable would be absolutely one piece of that we would do differently. So if you can think back and visualize, if we could rewind that circle, the approach that we would take is instituting established measurable KPIs, even early in the pilots. We now do that, especially through our external product launch, which I am excited to share about. But looking back on what we could have done differently, that ownership and accountability is directly measured with KPIs. So looking at what the flex time actually encouraged as far as output KPIs. So that was a big aha moment for us. This full circle focus from the shop floor to the quality to the customer ultimately led to several major milestones for us. But one that I wanted to talk about today was our first patent pending product, the double barrel lifter. We introduced the SimTech double barrel lifter to revolutionize barrel handling for the cooperage and barrel aging industry. Barrel handling, as you may or may not know, is actually the oldest technology in the world and has very rarely been innovated. It's been traditionally relied on methods that limit output, require intensive labor, and pose serious ergonomic risk. We adopted technological innovation directly into the double barrel lifter mechanism itself, engineering it to boost capacity, improve operational efficiencies, and significantly enhance ergonomics. But adopting the technology and innovation on the floor is truly only half the battle. You can see again how this impacts the full circle of our business. We also completely innovated our commercialization plan and go-to-market strategy. We built a comprehensive multi-channel sales strategy targeting 3 very specific pillars: cooperage houses, producers, and equipment manufacturers. As you can imagine, with cooperage houses, driving adoption as a value-added offering and building OEM partnerships is critical. With producers, we sit in Southern Indiana, so really close to bourbon country, targeting distilleries, breweries by emphasizing the return on their investment and providing pilot programs with measurable KPIs. And then with equipment manufacturers, integrating our product into their existing machinery because it can be connected to any power source, be it pneumatic, electronic, or hydraulic, and offering technical integration guides has proven immensely successful. This innovative approach to both the product mechanism and our go-to-market strategy has caught attention. We are incredibly humbled to share that our efforts in driving domestic capacity and innovation resulted in an awarded proclamation from the Indiana Governor's Executive Office. It was massive validation for us that our tech adoption roadmap is working. I can also share with you that domestically and internationally, you've got SimTech double barrel lifters doubling capacity for the industry. With lots more room for growth. At the end of the day, SimTech is not just a manufacturer. We consider ourselves a multiplier in everything that we do. We take ideas, investments, and technology, and we turn them into lasting impact for our community. We solve manufacturers' problems. That's what we do. By bringing production back on shore and innovating with products like our double barrel lifter, we are contributing to the stability of critical U.S. industries. And with that, Justin, we are happy to open it up to questions.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jessica. It's a great story, and I'm glad to hear about all of the success you've all been having. One thing as we think about technology investments, I love that you paint it as the full circle. One thing, and we'll kind of talk about this a lot here, this first section, is thinking about your internal team and when you're implementing something new. How do you explain to your team why you're making changes in technology and why you're making investment, and how do you use that to bring them along on the journey as well?
Yes, we believe that it is very important to always go back to your North Star or your why. And our mission and vision is very simple. We want to be the premier manufacturer that manufacturers rely on. And so in anything that we present to our team to bring them along, we go back to the why. Are we accomplishing what this mission and vision is set out for? So in answering that question, that really is what we consider our stop go gate. And if we are not answering that question, then that's an immediate quick no. If we are answering and fulfilling that question as to our North Star, then the answer would be yes. And then we go down that path. And that's not to say that there are not multitude of lessons learned or I wish we would have knowns or should have knowns, but then we tighten up the process in our questioning to bring along the team as we pull in our internal stakeholders, our teammates, our master machinists, to our fabricators and engineering team.
That's great. When you're bringing everybody along, have you ever had a teammate who's trying to keep the old ways or try to find a workaround for new technology and new processes? And if so, how do you work with them to bring them along as well?
Yes. Well, as I mentioned, so when we purchased Simtech, it was a 43-year-old company at the time, a legacy company. We retained more than 80% of our former team members. So a lot of historic knowledge, a lot of the ways of things being done in the past. And so really it was kind of a learning. So Jared and I needed to get in there and learn the ways of the past. Again, go back to our mission and vision and what we're trying to accomplish and garner that buy-in. But if we are met with reluctance, and actually we talk about this often in every one of our leadership meetings, we want to understand and have ideas flushed both ways. So egos have to be aside. Jared and I do not think that we have all the answers. We know that we are not skilled machinists or engineers. And so bringing the team to kind of shoot holes in the thought process, or what are ways that it could go wrong. And I'm reflecting back as you asked that question, Justin. When we rolled out Flex Time, for example, in May of 2019, so it was prior to COVID, it was prior to everybody being forced to do things and think a little differently, we wanted to implement this work-life blend. And so when we rolled out Flex Time, we had a team member who has been with us now for 43 years, was with us at the time for gosh, what is that math? 37 years. That he met us with a lot of resistance, meaning, well, you're going to offer this. Everybody's going to take advantage, and it's going to reduce productivity. And in all honesty, it did the opposite. So we wanted to hear what the opposition would be, so that we could then counter it, and we set parameters as we rolled that out. So I don't think that resistance is a bad thing. I think that creates some very positive friction, and it helps to set the guardrails in place as you prevent them from happening after a rollout ensues.
Great. And actually, looks like we got one question in the chat for you, Jessica, from David White. So it's new product vision. So it's been done this way forever. How did your team identify the double barrel opportunity?
Yes. So this is actually a really remarkable story. So as I mentioned, we're in the business of solving problems. So if you think about who Simtech is overarchingly, yes, we are a manufacturer to and for manufacturers. In many cases, that is making parts that are existent from our customers. In other cases, it is getting into our manufacturing partners' facility and understanding what problems they have in the manufacturing process. It's what we call in our division production support. So we received a call from a cooperage house that wanted to speed up their capacity. They wanted to make a safer environment for their coopers. They pay their cooperage as far as how many barrels they turn. So the faster that they could turn barrels in that industry and blow out a truck, the more money and revenue that made for them. So they had purchased a power source. We worked directly with their dealer to create the apparatus that was one, durable, and two, would accomplish exactly what they needed to do, which was load a truck, take the loading of a truck from an hour and a half down to 30 minutes, as well as help implement within their actual workflow in their process. We did that in 2021. Did not think twice about it. Left the customer satisfied. In fact, that one is still in existence and is extremely durable. Fast forward to last year, 2024 into 2025, and they had guests walking their floor, producers as well as other sister companies, and they were like, "Where did you get that? We've been looking all over. The ones that we have aren't durable. They come from overseas, extremely problematic. We've spent millions of dollars looking to engineer one within our house." And so we received a multitude of inquiries and produced 11 more of those, both domestically and internationally. Of course, making advancements along the way, which eventually led to our patent pending status. Because honestly, if you know me well enough, you know that I'm pretty honest. It was kind of the kick in the butt we needed to say, hey, we're on to something. And this was our first proprietary product in way of, here's the problem, here's Simtech's engineered and manufactured solution, and away we go.
Great. I appreciate that that kind of full circle moment. It's always good to have purpose-driven transformation like that. And with that, I know we need to continue moving on, but Jessica, if you're open to it, I think people can continue to ask questions in the chat, and feel free to respond there as well. But thank you so much for sharing your story today. We really appreciate you being on and being a part of it.
Yes, thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. So, Jessica touched on a couple things that actually were really pertinent to this first topic that we're going through. So this first one of the kind of technology adoption and roadmap playbook that we're talking through is a people-focused strategy. So one of the things that when we talk to manufacturers and we hear common problems and things that really lead to a common failure pattern. So what we hear a lot is someone buys a tool, they hope that value appears, they tend to find adoption lagging, and then overall initiative stalls. And a lot of this happens because we do things without having that common vision, that common strategy. So we don't have that strategy. We're not doing it from a business problem or a business opportunity in that specific instance. We're not being transparent with our organization, or we don't have the right kind of literacy within the organization to understand what we're actually doing differently. Things show up on the shop floor, using workarounds after go live, bypassing workflows because they're focused on just hitting a number versus understanding the purpose of why we're doing changes. We're sounding alarms, but maybe nobody is owning that response routine, or we do some training, but it only happens once, and then we don't continue to make sure that our organization is ready for new technology. Other things that we can hear from the leadership side, everything feeling urgent. So it's a new priority, a new priority, not always necessarily reprioritizing. It's just adding more and more to the plate. Debates on just tools, so thinking about technology instead of the outcome. And then continuing to add KPIs, but maybe not having a primary KPI. What's our kind of our North Star from a metric perspective, and the team not being able to answer why we're doing something. And with that, and Jessica, you touched on this, which is actually one of my favorite kind of ideas, and it's a simple idea, but it's having that North Star, a vision that's aligned within your organization, that's aligning your, all of your business goals, the gaps in the market, your regulatory needs and requirements, what your customers are saying, what your existing technology baseline is, and your operational reality. What can you actually do? What can you manage? Taking all those inputs and creating a North Star. And that North Star is going to direct your team to understand what they need to optimize for. It's going to help you make decisions as a leadership organization and what we say yes to, what we say no to. And it's really going to help with the consistency. So we're taking away kind of a tool by tool argument because the tool isn't necessarily the outcome. The tool is just a way of achieving the outcome. And when we think of a North Star, it's really a single statement. Like, this is who we are as an organization, and this is going to guide our technology investments so that the business can win. And in reality, when the business wins, and as long as it's connected to the business outcomes and the business strategy, it helps everybody win. Now, the North Star strategy is, is a statement, is a simple idea, but it's very unique to who you are as an organization. Some different examples, thinking about, an automotive parts company. What they're focused on is, using technology and AI to be, repeatable operations. We need to improve throughput because that's what matters to us. Throughput, quality. We need to reduce costs and risks. Well, while an aerospace company, they have to use technology to meet very specific specifications. They need to have high precision, high control, traceability. So you think about what your organization is needing to accomplish. What are the metrics, the regulations that your organization needs to make the most important? And you take all of those pieces and bundle that into a single statement that guides your technology investments. It's going to guide your technology measurements, as well as your organization and how you continue to train and build. The way to think about, taking that strategy and then saying, okay, now let's start focusing on what we need to do differently as an organization. We need to start, adopting new things. Most organizations know that, there's a need for new technology, but where it starts to stall is treating it just as a procurement process, instead of starting with what is the business outcome that we need to achieve. Ultimately, if you're starting with your business outcome, that will lead you to the right tool purchase. What's going to most impact, my throughput? What is going to most impact, my cost? What's going to most impact, readiness? So obviously, most organizations, you're measuring all of these things. There's, a level of importance to each of them, but that's why you want to define from your North Star, what is your main objective that you want to achieve with this particular purchase, or what you want to achieve as you plan out your technology investments and roadmaps for the future. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that you're thinking of the outcomes, what's the workflow changes and things that are going to impact it, not just picking a technology. And with that, there's this idea that is a business problem discovery. And again, we will send out materials after the event that helps with some of these frameworks. We have different guides and templates that we can share that is based on this content. But when we think about business problem discovery, why are we going to make a change in technology? The idea is to use these kind of 5 pieces. What's going to happen, or what is happening today? So what's the current problem or symptom that we're seeing? Where does it happen? Is this a specific cell? Is it within a specific line? Maybe it's a shift or a product. Who is the one that's feeling this? Is this something that's impacting our people working operations? Is it somebody in the maintenance? Is this a customer that this is impacting? And what is it causing it? Is it causing us to have scrap, rework time? Are we having late shipments? What is the actual impact within there? And then what's the baseline? So if we know these problems exist, what is our starting point to say this is the number that we need to change? So going back to what's a way to measure your impact? You can take that, make a simple statement, because this happens, at this place, these people feel it, and this is where we are today. This is the reality. So, an example for machine vision, manual inspection misses defects on the machine and a specific machining cell. Operators and quality feel it as rework or late orders. We have a first pass yield of 92%, defect escapes, of 18 per month. So something with that idea that's a tangible statement, a tangible, measurable statement that is going to direct where we make investments. So that way, when you start thinking first, what's the problem? Well, now you can start looking for the technology, because the problem can be solved in a lot of different ways. And technologies solve a lot of different problems, but sometimes, you tend to be buying things, or you might buy something that isn't necessarily going to solve the problem that you're focused on. There's a story that we always hear, somebody bought a $25,000, automated retrieval machine because, they said it's a great deal. They got it half off, and it ended up sitting, in the corner, not being used, essentially as a very expensive paperweight, because it wasn't necessarily going to be impacting the things that made results. It made some operations, faster, but it caused more problems with the constant rework, remapping in a business that is constantly changing the direction of their shop floor as they're growing. So it wasn't actually servicing the objective that they were trying to receive. So when we think about first, what is the problem, then we can start matching technology. So things like quality, scrap, rework, Plus, we started thinking about, okay, we can use analytics or BI investments to analyze our existing data if we have it. Or we can use machine vision systems to start, if we have a raw material or an output that we need to have that's more quality precise. AI and machine learning, so we can continue to grow and understand, from our vision inspection system over time and make it better. Similarly, each area within, what you're trying to achieve, there's different technology that's more appropriate for each one of those. Again, I'm not going to jump to each one of these, so you'll feel free to take screenshots throughout. And again, we'll send out some of the materials afterwards as well. But what we're trying to focus on here is understanding what's your problem and understanding that there's different technology options that can service that. And then we start thinking a lot about AI today. It's one of the categories, but it's got means a lot to a lot of different people. But from our experience, there's a lot of different use cases that we're seeing, fit in, from people that have, no connected machines or equipment and have very limited data, to those that have the most mature and advanced capabilities within their organization. So starting with things like using co-pilots for frontline knowledge workers, so people that can use to help understand their SOPs while they're on the shop floor. Working to develop automated production scheduling, so it helps with your daily scheduling or when there's incidents, using all the different inputs and requirements. We're going back to that, vision systems and how you use it to improve quality or predictive maintenance, document automation. So not just what's going to impact what's being in production, but how do we get the highly repetitive tasks out of people's hands so they can spend more time doing more strategic work, more high value add work. The other element that we think about, and Jessica touched on this as well, is we start thinking about how we interact with our organizations when it comes to change. So technology investments can cause a lot of different things from a process standpoint, but it also changes a lot in a perception standpoint. So there's a lot of things that we need to be proactive about when we think of our investments, communicating and working with the team, bringing them along at the appropriate times. There's a lot of questions on, is my job going to get moved? If we're buying new equipment, like who's going to be blamed if it breaks? I've never worked with this before. I don't have time to learn something new. You're just adding more and more to my plate, or this was decided without anybody in the room that actually does operations. So it's being able to take those concepts and turn them over to more phrases that work. We're doing things to make jobs safer. We're piloting to learn. We're not here to judge or blame people. We're taking in ideas because we want to know what works, and you're the one closest to the work. If we scale, we're making commitments to training and to support. So we're not just throwing something at our teams. In reality, there's certain enablers that allow us to develop that trust. And when you have trust, that leads to better adoption. At the end of the day, you can have the greatest piece of technology, and it doesn't make a difference if people aren't actually using it. If they're not actually using a new process, if they're not changing how they're doing to achieve the results that you want, then your investment tends to be similar to the automated retrieval device that can just sit in the corner and collect dust. Digital investments are the same way. So understanding and communicating what's the purpose, what's the involvement that it's going to be impacted, what's the current process and your pain points that it's going to impact. Having leaders show up and be at the front. So not just telling people what to do, but actively supporting and being involved in the technology adoptions, being involved in process changes. And then one of the big things that people tend to forget is that training is not optional and it's not after hours. It needs to be part of your organization. It needs to be part of the things that change along with the technology. It's a way to keep it, the process flowing and bringing people at the right time. So it starts with, communicating it so they know what's changing. So it's kind of ties back to the why are we making changes, helping them understand, what's going to be the requirements to succeed, and then as well, how it connects to them. So now I get it. Changing that to the next stage, which is we're starting to try it. So you're starting to accept the benefits. You can highlight some wins. You do the training. You make things visible. So we're impacting and promoting when things are going better. And then finally start owning it. And only then will you be able to successfully live by new metrics and new practices once people have accepted that it's part of their process. They've accepted that it's part of the new organization or the new processes as well. And then that, again, gotta give credit where it's due. And the last one that we'll talk on in this topic is taking that and creating that why story. So, I asked Jessica, how do you explain the why to your team? There's a lot of different ways to do it, but it's always good to have something prepared when you start a new technology adoption journey, or whether it's big and transformative, or it's something simple as saying, hey, we're going to start using Microsoft Copilot. We want to start experimenting with ChatGPT, but understanding and how to communicate a few things to them. So why are we doing this now? So what's changed? Is this something external that's influencing us, whether it's customer demand or new technologies, market pressures? Our competitors are doing this. What's the problem? What's broken? Where do we have opportunities to improve things within our organization? What we're going to ask of you that's changing specifically. So if this is a workflow change or a process change, how we learn. So what's the time frame that we're going to be implementing this change in? Whether it's a pilot or an evidence time, and then committing to those feedback loops. So understanding when we're going to finalize the change, so to speak. And then the last piece is, how do we know we're successful? What does it look like? What's the main piece of measurement that we're going to use to record on this? Right. And with that is going to wrap up our first module of the day. And I do want to then welcome Josh David Heiser from Indiana Oxygen. He's going to tell us a little bit about his role, his company, and then from there, we're going to start talking about more of the value and business case elements of a technology adoption journey.
Yeah. Thanks, Justin. Hello, everyone. Appreciate Justin and Jay the opportunity to be on the call here today. As Justin, you mentioned, I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Indiana Oxygen Company. We are a 111-year-old gas and welding supply distributor headquartered in Indianapolis, Indiana. We have 195 employees spread across 13 branches. 11 of those which are in Indiana. 2 of them are in Ohio. We have 1 in Dayton and 1 in Cincinnati. We've got a pretty good swath of the state of Indiana. We specialize in industrial products, right? We are an input to a lot of our customers' production facilities, and we pride ourselves on serving that customer so well with the highest quality of service that they have no interest in leaving us for the competition. It's an interesting time in our industry. Our industry is traditionally, you think of welding and gases. It's an old industry. Welding has been around for a long time. And with a very mature industry comes a lot of opportunities. Some of the things that we're working on internally here, I'll share one of the projects that has gone well. I like to tell people that, I'm not really a gas and welding company. People say that. When you really look at our business, we're really a distribution company. We're an asset management company just based on what we do. As a part of that, one of the projects that we looked at was really how we distribute amongst our branches and amongst our footprint. So we really utilized our IT team. We went out to a third-party agency and really identified a need for us to streamline and to automate the routing of our trucks to make deliveries to customers. So Justin, you in that last session, you really talked about that North Star and like the why. I mean, I highlighted in that value statement just earlier. If I'm not delivering my product to the customers, my competitors are able to provide those same products at a lot quicker. They could displace me within that production facility. So we are really looking at serving that customer, ensuring that they have what they need to produce what they're producing. So that's really getting at the why of why we're doing that. We were able to implement this third party really logistics tool, implemented our data into it. It automatically routed our trucks. And a key thing when you're implementing these things is we did not go out to the entire company with this. We had a pilot. We looked at a couple branches, try to find the main pain points that were inhibiting our ability to serve that customer. We knew we wanted to serve them quicker, more efficiently, fully burden those trucks with all the products we could in a given day. So we had that end goal in mind, and then get back to the tool that we could use to make sure we could accomplish that. So the cool success story we had with the pilot was we did have one branch that we were rolling it out to, and they were skeptical Change is always hard. And so we kind of rolled it out, and we were met with some just hesitation, and pessimism a little bit. It just so happened that the day that we were going to do this, we had a couple drivers call off, and which left like 1 or 2 drivers, and those drivers themselves were understanding, holy cow, like I've got so many of these deliveries to make now. I'm not gonna get home until 7 p.m. So that was the mindset going into the day. We kind of ripped the Band-Aid off and said, hey, well, as a matter of fact, we've got this tool that we're going to roll out starting today. Why don't you go ahead and use this? Rolled it out with the branch manager, the routing system. We input our data, automated it, and those drivers were back by 3 or 4 p.m. I mean, it just created such an efficient method and process that really streamlined and looked at the geography where we were going, to really help us drive that. It was a huge success story. We published that and continued to kind of promote that internally, saying, hey, this was a pretty skeptical approach, and we were met with skepticism. This is what it actually did for these folks, and ensured that our customers had what they needed, when they expected it. So that's the success story. I'll kind of fast forward to a little bit of kind of what we're doing now, with AI, and we've kind of struggled with it internally. What do we want it to look like? What is really our strategy around it? Who do we want to have access to different things? So we've actually went out and hired a consultant to help us kind of navigate this, navigate the landscape of what's available. How does this fit in for us? So we're trying to find our way through this. It's still ongoing. We're really finding some of the low-hanging fruit within the admin side, of the financial realm here. But then obviously, looking at what the business needs, strategizing around where we want to be, where do we want to go, what do we want this to look like, and then trying to find the tools to help us get there, is kind of where we're at right now with our journey. So that's kind of the lay of the land when it comes to the technology and rolling it out, IT projects out within Indiana Oxygen.
Right. Thanks, Josh, for that. It's a good overview, and I think a lot of people are right on that kind of beginning of the journey with AI, especially in understanding how they're going to find opportunities, where they're going to drive value and get payback, and understanding what does it mean to be successful in there. Thinking about just general technology investments, at Indiana Oxygen, you as a CFO, how do you measure, a new technology investment that's proposed to you, and whether or not that's something that's worth investing in? I know a lot of people, they've had a great idea, but it's not always easy to get to convince their CFO. So understanding what are the elements that you look at for new investment proposals.
Yeah, I mean, I'll reference your previous session or your previous section there. There was a lot of good stuff in there. I think you read my notes there, Justin, just a little bit. But no, you really have to find that. I mean, the North Star. You have to figure out the why. There's so many shiny objects out there now, and they're seemingly kind of multiplying as more technology comes out. More consultants are out there, and there's a lot of different ways to get at different problems. You really have to first understand where you're planting your flag within your company, within the direction, within the vision of where you want to take it. So when I'm approached with this, with opportunities and technologies and different projects, it's really understanding, okay, and it's just like Jessica said too, what do we want to be? Like, is this really where we want to go? And what is our vision? How and will it aid in how we're going to get there? Really understanding the root cause that is necessitating this seemingly fix or the new technology. That's really what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the impact through every portion of the business, and listening and looking for opportunities for efficiency. How is this going to drive, obviously, my accounting team, but how is it going to impact operations? How is it going to impact my distribution? I highlighted the fact that we've got a lot of trucks everywhere. We got a lot of assets everywhere. How can I get more efficient? And will it arm me and the other executives with the knowledge that we need to then be flexible and pivot the business and the method and the methodology we need to, and with the mindset we need to, in order to achieve our long-term goals?
No, that's great. So thinking about, long-term goals and how you measure that impact outside of just, dollar return, straight cost
Mhm.
reduction, what other values do you weigh when you're evaluating things, time saved, capacity, risk, and what, from
Yeah.
your perspective, what are the most important?
Yeah, I mean, obviously as a good CFO, I quantify all those different things, but there's a lot to your point. There's a lot of softer things, right? That it's not going to be a hard and fast number. When I'm thinking about those things, is it going to allow our people to better serve that customer? How can I better equip our folks? How can we better equip our folks for that, to allow that customer to say yes quicker to us? And what I mean by that is maybe we can free up some people to tackle some of the more difficult issues that our customers are facing. We want to provide our customers with solutions. We're solutions focused. The oxygen molecule that I provide our customers is the same that our competitors can provide. The secret sauce that we have is, okay, I want to be able to listen to the customer, get involved and understand their various processes to then be able to provide them a potential solution and partner with them to provide that solution. So if within these projects, yeah, like we can look at cost savings, this, that, and the other, but what is going to allow those qualitative aspects and factors to kind of pop out and help us rise just a little bit higher than our competitors? How is it going to position me, and will it can position me to be able to better serve our customers in a way that's beneficial for them, and essentially creating that value for them in that partnership with us as their vendor?
Yeah, no, that's extremely important. It's a great point. It's not just value for you as your company and your
Mhm.
operations at cost, but how does it serve the end customer as well?
Yeah.
For you, as a company leader, one thing I would ask, for a company leader that's trying to make like a financial case or business case for a new investment, what's the one thing that you'd tell them as they start planning a new technology?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really, obviously I want to see a nice, clean business case, right? That's not always the case, but I just want them to be aware of you sometimes you got to look around the corner and you got to see, okay, yeah, you're solving for this problem now, but how else can we leverage this? So I really want them to be focusing on, this is the solve now, but how can we then scale this? Is this an opportunity to address anything that might be coming down the road? And that's where that partnership internally happens, where just having those conversations to create that flexibility within our business. That's kind of what I'm asking and listening for them to kind of come back with.
Yeah. And I think we got one question in the chat. Right.
Justin, I don't know if I lost you, if you can hear me, but I lost your audio.
Okay. I think it was on my end. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you.
All right. So the one question I saw in the chat is something you might have mentioned, but when you're selecting a new technology to roll out, how do you select which branches you're going to pilot to?
Gotcha. Yeah. So really, we looked at some of the larger ones. I mean, we looked at the bigger pain points. We wanted to get a nice big swath of data. In that branch we selected, we had multiple routes in there. So we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just a one-off anomaly with if we would have rolled it out to, say, a branch with one routing truck or one truck to route, it would not have been probably as fruitful for us. So we wanted multiple trucks, multiple instances to kind of get at and to really, quite honestly, to fail as quick as we could with as many trucks as we could, to then go back and pivot and find those ways to improve it. So we kind of looked at from that standpoint.
Yeah, it's almost trying to make sure it's to be almost biggest bang for your buck there.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, Josh, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience in your company, and Again, similar ask for you. I think as people continue to have questions within the chat, I think feel free to ask Josh. CFO perspective is you don't always get every day, so it's always good to have incorporated.
Yep.
But again, thank you so much for your time and joining us today, Josh.
Yep, for sure. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Justin.
All right, thank you. All right, so building on some of that, and the first portion or first module of today's session, we're going to go to the next one, which is talking more about value realization. And what we mean by that is, trying to understand how to communicate the value of a technology investment, measure the value of a technology investment, beyond just maybe what the business case or the savings that comes from the vendor. So sometimes what we hear is that projects stall not just because maybe the math is there, but we don't have certainty in the decision that we're making. So ROI makes sense, and we still can't get it approved. Finance wants more detail that we can confidently provide. Benefits are real, but it's hard to prove out or isolate, or we don't fully trust the assumptions coming from the investment. So there's a lot of things that kind of lead to some of our questions and uncertainty that make getting a business case approved very challenging. So one thing that we're going to walk through is this idea of how to build a strong decision on a value model. So again, based off of conversations that we hear and how we get successful investments move forward, it's three parts. One, risk of inaction. So what happens if we don't make this investment? What's our current status quo that we're impacting? Two is our impact hypothesis. So what do we expect to change, and how will we know it? How will we measure it? And then the clear value, what are we going to gain once that change is implemented? So coming back to usually, how do we communicate the dollars coming back to the company? So we start with the risk of inaction. Deterring is, what do leaders care about? So there's the idea of, well, okay, we can lose, marketplace, or things are going to continue to be the same. Well, typically things are already operating. We always know it's not always smoothest, but sometimes change is harder than the results you get out of it. So really being able to quantify and communicate why there's a problem if we continue to do things the way we do. So understanding things like measurable impacts, scrap, downtime, inefficiencies that we can communicate that'll continue. Customer risks that are increasing. If we have late orders or quality issues, it could be less, direct dollar impacts, but things like, key knowledge. If we don't make this change, then we might not be able to continue operations once, a certain person retires, or if the knowledge walks out the door with them. Things like teams are creating workarounds, so they're not actually following a process instead of, following the improved systems. And lastly is thinking about okay, our customers. Other people are moving faster, they're moving forward, and we don't want to get left behind in the marketplace. So way to think about it is, okay, if we come back in 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, and we did nothing, do things get worse? And where will we have? So a thought exercise as you start evaluating a technology problem from a business case perspective. Then we move on to the second part, the idea of the impact hypothesis, defining what you expect to move. So this is just a very simplified template, and again, we can share these things out. But it's starting with one, the change. What are we going to actually do differently? In this example, predictive maintenance, we're going to deploy an AI predictive maintenance model on critical equipment that uses sensor and historical failure data. Great, that's what we're going to do. What are we expecting the impact to be? So what's going to move up or down, or stay steady, things like that. So in this situation, we would expect decrease unplanned downtime, decrease overtime, and increase on-time delivery. Those are the things that we're going to measure to be successful. And how do we measure it? Well, the primary KPI that we're going to say, this is our kind of our North Star on this investment, this particular project, is unplanned downtime hours per month. So that's what we're going to say, this is the dollars that we're impacting. So taking that and then starting to build out your plan and your impact and your business case from a value perspective, but then also turning that into, we're going to call driver math. So it's actually turning those and translating them into dollars. When we think about that value and what we're communicating, it's more than just the direct cost savings. There are really kind of 4 ideas or 4 lenses that you can apply for considering the value or the return on your technology investment. So cost is obviously huge, the biggest portion of it. Can we reduce that spend? Can we reduce the waste? Do we have measurable savings and the actual cost that is going out the door for us to produce a product or produce a service? scrap rework, overtime, labor hours, energy, warranty claims, things like that have a very direct dollar impact. Well, then you have other things that are a little less direct. Productivity is still fairly direct. So we know we can increase productive time. So the amount of output that we have on the same amount of hours. So keeping constrained operators and things running predictably. You can measure OEE, your uptime, first pass, line stops per week. So there's very specific things that you can measure that aren't costs going out the door, but they are indicators of your productivity as an organization. And you think about speed, our ability to respond faster to change, whether that's volume or customer demands, things like that. Change over time, how quickly we can move on to the next batch. Are we adhering to our schedule? Are we keeping things on time? Our lead time, time to quote, onboarding time for employees or onboarding time for customers. So what it means is our responsiveness as an organization. So our ability to be able to compete from a speed perspective. And the last one is our risk. So things that people often really only consider from a regulatory standpoint, but there's more beyond that. So it's avoiding disruption, safety instances, cyber outages, compliance failures. So yes, do we have incidents? What's our incident rate per month? What are our near misses, audit findings, recovery time, outage cost exposure? So thinking about ways to plan an investment and understand how you can communicate and measure value beyond just, we spend X dollars on product, service, or labor today, and it'll be X, or Y dollars tomorrow. Well, we can also talk about our ability to serve faster, our ability to be more productive and produce more, our ability to reduce our risk and things that are not expected of our dollar costs, but are things that are still opportunity costs that we want to avoid as best as we can. So how do you take that and make it tangible? Well, we all know ROI can be hard, in manufacturing logistics. It's all over the place. It's across different teams. You have operations costs, maintenance costs, quality, finance. It exists in ownership ways everywhere. Not all the value is hard dollars, right? We have incomplete data a lot of times, so we're having to make estimates, or we have gaps. Similarly, some things are underestimated. So we don't really consider always our internal support time or training time, integration costs. So thinking about beyond just the direct people involved in a process, the direct purchase of an equipment. And then ultimately, when we want to think about results or our estimating results, is the reality is that adoption is what's going to drive those results. So we can spend money, we can plan for changes, but until people adopt, it's not going to make a difference from a cost and value perspective. So something like we lose a certain amount per week, or day. We improve by 20-30%, like great, that's going to result in this amount of units impacted, this amount of hours impacted, events reduced, and being able to put an estimate or quantification on that. So it's a very simplified view of billing, kind of like a business case for each measurement, but it's better to be directional than being exact and missing elements of your value proposition in the story and the alignment back to your overall strategy. When we think about the cost of implementing something, there's a lot of costs and elements that are often forgotten about. So we think about the total cost of ownership. 4 main elements: your setup costs. So this is where the things you're actually buying, whether it's hardware, software, your implementation costs, your safety reviews, your ongoing costs. So do we have to pay for this every month from a subscription standpoint? Is this going to include increase our cloud usage if we're implementing software solutions or AI? Do we have the support contracts that are going to hit us annually or monthly? Do we know that there's new consumable costs that we're going to have from a maintenance perspective? Do we have to implement new monitoring tools? So, okay, great, we're going to implement customer-facing AI tools. What systems is that going to access? How are we measuring it or monitoring to make sure it's not going beyond what it's supposed to do? The internal costs. So, what's the time of our operators? The supervisors that are testing and training. Our maintenance windows. Are we including install times, downtimes, troubleshooting, everything that's going to involve with the new system? Our security and technology costs from an IT perspective. So security, networking. Do we know that we have the right access stand up? Do we have to pay for somebody to fix that? And then ongoing continuous improvement. Do we have to continue to upgrade standards? Do we have to continue to train our resources on it? And the last piece is the risk and safety compliance costs. Do we have to implement new safety reviews? Do we have to have new guardrails as far as user access, testing? Do we have to do documentation? Do we have to have, new elements from training and, change management from our implementation? So thinking about all the cost elements is another part that's definitely needed for, from that strong business case, as Josh mentioned. Very simple way to put it all together, starting with what's the business problem, your hypothesis, making sure you're defining the scope of your technology investment. So, okay, we're going to implement something new to improve a specific problem. Well, we're going to start with a specific cell, or we're going to start with, specific shifts, the amount of hours and days of the week, and be able to communicate that value. So this one, great. In inspection hours, we're going to have somewhere between, $800 to $2,000 reduction at $38 an hour. We want to reduce overtime hours through this scrap and rework. So if we think about what does that look like over a 3-year period, well, the implementation cost, the training cost, the setup cost is going to cost us, $400,000 in this example for, vision inspection on a machining cell. And what's the benefit that we can get out of it? Well, from the hour reduction, the scrap reduction, we expect, $130,000 back. That gives us about a 2-year payback period. So thinking about it from the full value beyond just cost of parts reduction, but thinking about your overtime, your scrap, your rework, your vision inspection, thinking about all of the elements from a cost perspective, this is what allows us to put together a more value statement and business case. All right. And with that, I think we're going to move on to our last guest speaker and our last section. So I'd like to welcome Alex McKee from Shields Windshields. Alex, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about what you guys have going on over there.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. I'm with Shields Windshields. We're located in Martinsville, Indiana. Which I do have some fun photos if you want me to share those. I wasn't exactly sure what to plan for that, but we are coming up on 51 years in business, family owned and family operated. My grandparents started the company in 1975 out of their basement, oven, garage setup. And then they established this facility here in 1978, I believe, 3 years later. And we've been at this same facility since then. We've expanded, and it's kind of like a Lego building where it's all kind of whatever we could afford to build on, they built on and on and on and on. My father is our president. I am third generation. I've been with the company for 6 years now, which seems kind of insane. But we're probably not alone in the island of, we didn't have what I would consider technology when I came on board in 2020. We had CNC machines, so we were heavy in CNC. We have multiple CNC machines, and I should probably talk about what we do first. We make polycarbonate windows. So there's safety windows. They're 1/2 inch thick. They go in skid steers and excavators, big, large wheel loaders. We work in a multitude of avenues. We do business to business with a dealer and distributor model that we supply them. Then we also work with like a fleet program. So we'll fill out, recycling company fleets. And then we also do have the door open to business to consumer, which is a interesting navigation that we balance between having dealers and distributors and our own direct to consumer. But there's a multitude of reasons that we do that for, but it continues to grow our product line. And so when I came on in 2020, we've always been very product oriented, product first, quality, everything about product. And we've always been a very big operations family where, some other aspects of business were kind of, I don't know about it so much. We're just gonna keep pushing the best product. And with that, we have a huge customer base that's very loyal. But in order to continue to scale and to continue to compete as our industry grew in competitors, there's not very many people that form and coat polycarbonate in-house. There's less than 10 manufacturers that I'm aware of globally that do this. And so when I started, or when I was younger, there was maybe 4 or 5. So the industry started to grow in itself. And so we needed to be able to scale. And to do that, we needed to look at our technology. And many years ago when I got started, I didn't know much. I am not a tech person at all. And it was very clear to me after getting into it that I was not a technology person, but what I had was a vision. And going back to all the previous speakers, nail it on the head, talking about your why, what's your vision, what's your goal, where are you going? And so we did that and we worked our way backwards. I had to restart some things a couple of times as we are growing at the same time. So that was a bit of a challenge, but we started out and with just paper. Everything besides maybe our accounting system was paper. And so the adoption rate, and I have employees, our longest standing employees, 49 years, a lot of them in the 30s, a lot of them in the 20s. And so technology adoption for them, they've been doing the same paperwork style for the most part for 30, 25, 40 years. And so that was a big adjustment. And what we did was we got our vision, we got our goal, what we wanted to do and what we wanted to show. I wish I could say that back in the day, I had this beautiful presentation that Justin just displayed showing all the data and all the return and all those things. No, I was very much I jumped into the deep end and said, we've got to do this, and figured it out along the way. One of the biggest things I was not aware of in the beginning was with our building being so old and it being kind of puzzle pieced together, just a bunch of metal buildings, our infrastructure to support advancing our technology was not there. And so the first portion of everything had to be getting our infrastructure ready to where I can launch, whatever technology we need to, and we have the capacity and the hardware out there to do that, and was not aware of how expensive that was going to be for us. So that was a big cost that we had to cross. And so once that got into place, getting the infrastructure going, it was a big thing, research, right? Always looking at what all these technologies can offer. And I love the saying that there's a lot of shiny things out there, and there are, and they're doing their business trying to sell you what they have. And what I came to realize was we're building an ERP system. So that was what we were working on, an ERP system that connected to our accounting system, which is, there's not a whole lot out there that do just the ERP. We learned that pretty quick. But realizing that a lot of the technology that we could buy was not necessarily something right out of the box that we could apply. It had to be customized, or it had to, we had to adjust to it a little bit, or we had to find loopholes, get creative. Because our process is unique and it's not an automated line. We do have quite a bit of automation, but not everything's automated. We still rely heavily on people. And so it's trying to weigh, it was trying to weigh what can we customize to ourselves without spending, 6 figures or more, which I was not approved to spend to prove this. Eventually, I think we'll be able to upgrade to something that is more customizable to us. But for now, we had to make what we could afford work and then prove that it was going to give us the return that we set out for. And so, which it has. So that's good. It has. But the research was really big. And one of the best things that I think we did was I went and visited and kind of had like each of the top 3 companies. I said, okay, give me some referrals. And if you have any in the state, I want to go see these systems in action, and learning from companies who already have them. What was your pain points? Where did you struggle? What do you love? What's easy? What's very user friendly? Because I think user friendliness is something that was really important to me because of the age of our team members and the lack of tech experience that we've had on the floor. So that was really important. And then I learned the hard way about how important the scale of your implementation plan needs to be and understanding your resources. So one of the biggest challenges we had rolling out our ERP was the fact that we were growing, and the people that I needed to put energy and effort into developing this were the same people that are leading and running my teams. And so finding a way and making sure, we tried all different avenues. Okay, hey, we're going to do one once a week. We're going to meet monthly, quarterly. We had all the meetings set up, all the structures, but it just came down to the fact that we had to take over 2,000 products and put and develop them and move them from paper into this system. And there's no way to make it automated because we've just have it in paper. So that was a big challenge, and realizing that the resources, your A players only have so much capacity. So my biggest role in a lot of this was managing my A players and saying, okay, hey, we're falling behind in your area in this development. What can I take off your plate to modify your time so that you can focus? One of them, my head of operations, who had to put a lot of the data in, his biggest frustration was just constant interruptions from his management team, or, the sales reps or whoever it might be. And so finally I just flat said, hey, don't bother him. He's not here today. Every Wednesday he's not here. And that seemed to work pretty well for him. And, managing them and their time and making sure they have the time to do that. That was really a big challenge. It's been good to see it come through, though. We've actually been able to increase capacity. Last year, for about year to date, we're about 15% increase on capacity. And that's been amazing. We've been able to scale our growth from there without adding any more costs in order to do that, which was really exciting. So, and I have a very different model with my father being my boss. I was able to kind of trip and stumble and figure a lot of this out along the way. And if I could go back and do it again, I would say my implementation plan, I would have more dialed in. And I put a big, heavy emphasis on our training, which I think actually was very successful. I probably would put more emphasis on the planning side. It was kind of like I said, jumping in the deep end, figuring it out as we go, which I still kind of do sometimes. Sometimes we're forced into doing that. But the training, I'm very proud of how we handled our training and getting our buy-in. We called it the sprinkle system. So we started with hardware, and I knew it would take us 2 to 3, if not more, years to fully execute the ERP system. And so rather than waiting to introduce technology to our production floor, we went ahead and got the hardware on the floor, and we got it going and moved a lot of our production data that we do collect from paper and went ahead and moved it into Google Sheets. And so we were in live, they were used to using their tablets, moving to their PCs on the floor and their screens. They slowly started to adapt to getting to that. Then we turned on the inventory portion. And so it was another kind of sprinkle in on a little bit more technology. And then we're going to move in, and we moved into the production section, and then we're going to move into the fulfillment section. And so there's pros and cons to going at a slow pace, which we have been, but I think that's the pace we needed to be at to be successful with it. I had very big concerns if I threw the entire thing at the team. I don't think there'd be any training or time enough to get everybody up to speed. We put a piece out there, tackled all the speed bumps, put another section out there, tackled all the speed bumps. Actually made a lot more work on my end and on the accounting end and keeping everything clean, but it was worth it rather than it completely blowing up in my face, I guess. So that was big. And then with our training, I don't have a big fancy, a lot of verbiage, I guess, but the trust, everybody kept mentioning trust. And I think that is number one, knowing the why, making sure you can explain the why. But one of the biggest things I think we learned along the way was not everybody has the vision in their mind. And so when you're communicating the why, or you're training somebody hands-on or just verbally, making sure that there's no language barrier. And I'm not necessarily meaning, I speak English, you speak Spanish. I'm meaning verbiage. Most of my shop floor operators don't understand certain business acronyms or verbiage or what we're trying to do. So translating and making sure that it's in layman's terms, it's very user-friendly. You're out there walking through demos, making sure that you're running tests, making sure that everything that they're doing isn't going to hinder their production or their current, giving them trials. And I'm very glad we did, because the first few times we did it, they were horrible. It was a disaster. And so, learning from the speed bump, moving on to the next stage, and continuously growing. And then at the same time, we've been able to take those chunks and then turn around and show the team and display the success and the improvements and the efficiency improvements, and letting them know not just explaining the why, but then showing them the proof that, hey, this is more efficient, this is better, our reject percentage is down 0.5% since we started doing this. And it's been a big challenge. And I think myself being out there, my management team being out there, our president doesn't really get involved in technology very often, but he doesn't hinder us. So he lets us run pretty much full speed. So being out there, like I've, about every month I'm out on the floor for almost a week. I just kind of shift my office just in case there are barriers that need addressed and need updated and support in that regard.
Yeah,
So it's been an adventure.
It's a great story, and it's great to hear about people taking on new challenges, especially through growth. One thing I want to think about, as you're a growing business, how do you decide what to take on now versus what needs to wait? I know you talked about doing in different chunks, but how do you make those kind of scaling decisions?
That's a great question. I like to look at patterns. So the impact and the patterns. What is the impact going to be? I really like, it was mentioned earlier, how many different departments, is it going to impact customers? Is it going to impact production? Is it going to impact, savings? From there, and then what kind of pain points would it be resolving? And then how many times have I heard those pain points, right? If it's reported to me every month that our error rate in our sales reps, sales orders are, increasing. I start to see that pattern that we're seeing a problem there. Okay, if this addresses that problem, I think it's now time to tackle that. And also the scale of cost and implementation. How long or how large is this project going to be? I know putting in the ERP, I had to pin and push off quite a few projects that would have been potentially quicker, but would not have the return that did. So I, pushed off some small things, tackled the big one because of the return and the patterns that I saw it would resolve essentially.
That's great. I want to make sure, hey, Alex, you have a chance to answer some of the questions in chat.
Yeah.
I think one of the ones we'll go with, just keep going. But the question, what ERP system did you ultimately go with that you're working through?
Yeah, so we went with Misys before researching, and I'd never had heard of it, but we went with Misys for two main reasons. One, cost. This was the first major software in production we've ever put out. I did not want to run the risk of $100,000 implementation and not work. So a learning curve, we went with a more affordable one. And I really liked that it actually connects with our QuickBooks. And so we've got two separate units. Some people love that. Some people hate that. What I like about it is I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket. If I wanted to change accounting systems at this time, I could. Now it's a headache and I don't recommend it unless it's necessary, but you could, right? You're not stuck, or if one goes down, the whole thing's not down. And so that was one of the reasons we went with Misys.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Alex. I'm sure people are going to continue to ask questions in the chat, so you'll feel free to ask her, and we'll try to wrap up here in the next about 9 minutes. But again, thanks, Alex, so much for your time today and sharing the great things happening at Shields. All right. So to kind of go with that theme, we're going to move on to this last topic, which is scaling with discipline. So one of the things that we hear, and I think it's actually relevant to the question in chat, is thinking about as we go along the journey, we tend to hear that technology adoption fails when it's treated as procurement instead of a long time journey. We tend to see people starting with experimenting or exploring, understanding what the problems are, being able to test the feasibility, see what the baselines are, taking that idea and turning it into a pilot. And then as you go to prove it out, scaling it and embedding it within your systems, that's where you start getting the value. And where people tend to get stuck is in that kind of pilot purgatory, or the value trough, where we've implemented something, but we're not necessarily getting the full scale value out of it. And when we think about what kind of stalls pilots or those initial projects into that pilot purgatory phase, it goes back to a lot of the things that we've heard today. So not having the clear strategy up front, tying it back to your North Star, not having strong definitions, so understanding common language that people are communicating on, Maybe it's foundation. So you don't actually have the underlying infrastructure to grow or scale the investments that you're making. And then ultimately not having that clear decision on do we scale with a pilot or not. And we get stuck in a phase where we just leave the initial pilot running for a long time. We see a lot of people are experimenting, they're piloting things, but where people tend to stall out is taking that into scaling it further. So from our conversations with manufacturing logistics companies, we've come up with this idea of starting smart. So designing something with scale in mind. And Alex really touched on this as well, as when you start something, like being able to plan it the full amount, being able to understand how far you're going to scale, beyond just that initial phase, that initial pilot. So starting with your business problem, your initiative definition, we've kind of talked about both of those things, building out your project or your pilot plan, proving it out, being able to prove something, standardizing it, and then scale and replicating it. So understanding, how to take that same, training program and taking it to the next step, going on to the next, module, or maybe the next location, cell, things like that. So starting with the business problems, we talked about this earlier. It's a kind of a refresher, but what's happening and where does it happen? Who feels it? What does it cause? So it's not about starting with a tool. It's about starting with a business problem. The second one is getting into defining your initiative. So this is we're thinking about going from an idea to a project. So you start with an idea like, oh, we can use AI for this, or we can add cameras, something like that. Well, a definition is something that's narrowed down from an idea. So we have owners defined. We're starting with that KPI or a baseline. So we're taking it from an experiment to defining a project. We know what the impact is going to be, or we have to measure the impact, and we can kind of understand what the workflow change is going to be. From there, you get into the project. So this is when you're ready to actually take off. You have a scope and it's bounded. You know exactly where you're going to do it. You know what's going to be required from a readiness and activation planning perspective. You know what your stops decisions are going to be, or your scale decisions going to be, and ultimately you have the money to do it. I think this question was asked earlier too, like where do ideas come from? When we think about starting projects and pilots, ideas, they should come from everywhere. They should come from your executives, your leadership, but they should come from people on the operations floor. One of our members that we talk with have QR codes everywhere throughout their building, on the beams between machines, that when somebody has an idea like, hey, this is something we can implement that makes things go better, they can scan that QR code, submit an idea, and it goes to the continuous improvement team. So when you get onto a pilot or your project, you're ready to define it, you have all of the pieces that are needed. So you know who's going to be the owner, you know how you're going to measure it, you know what your decision date's going to be. How to scope, so what's in scope versus out of scope, who's going to be impacted, what you need from a technical requirements from your infrastructure, your power, your lighting, maintenance and support, any change readiness or training plans that you need, and ultimately what's your activation plan? Do you have your milestones? Do you know what your costs are going to be and your risks and mitigations? And then if you ultimately, you need to go to your executive leadership team, you know what you're asking for. We're going to jump over this, but this is an example. So it's kind of the same idea, just in actuality, what we're looking for. And then beyond the plan, so you build out your project and you're ready to, go further with your pilot and understand, is this working? Do you have value proof? The KPIs that you set out to say how you'll define success, did they prove true? Do you have the tangible evidence of success in your pilot? Were any guardrails in place that you had set out for? Did they adhere? You have adoption proof. You can prove that people are going to be using the new process or the new technology, and that usage you can measure. And then ultimately, do you have things documented to make it repeatable? Support training plans if needed. From there, it goes into your question of, do we scale this or not? Do we have standards that we can repeat? Do we have support that's sustainable? And do we have training in place to make sure that, this can be implemented across different cells, different sites, locations, different modules of technology? A way to simplify it, a replication plan after the pilot proves value, replicate it the same cell, same setup, same operating procedures and training, and we can review results weekly for 4 weeks. And when you take all those things together, you start thinking about beyond just a single project. And that's when we start thinking of a technology roadmap. And a roadmap isn't just, like a project plan expanded, but it's a decision system. Ultimately, you're going to have lots of different competing initiatives, different priorities, and they're going to be delivered at different times. And that's what the roadmap is for. It's about to take in new ideas. It gives you defined opportunities to refresh, to prune ideas, to make decisions to go and no go, and allows you to capture more opportunities and evaluate it in a larger, view of all your technology decisions. Ultimately, once you have everything in, the idea, define what best for your business, but a triage and prioritization sequencing. So understanding value, feasibility, risk, time to learn, and reusability. Taking all those elements and scoring it and saying when we should do things now, later in the event, or something that's even further beyond, say 12 months out. I know I ran through that last section, but we'll send out materials. I do want to, before we wrap up, bring on our Chief Operating Officer and Chief Strategy Officer, Bryce Carpenter, to give us a little bit more view of Connexus and to close us out.
Yeah, thank you all for being with us today and for hanging in over the lunch break. And we really appreciate it. Hope that you found all of this to be very helpful. And thank you to our 3 presenters for sharing such great information. This is a great example of what Connexus does and the role we try to play, which is to bring industry leaders together to talk about how they have overcome challenges within the advanced manufacturing and logistics ecosystem to help all of you accelerate faster, grow faster, and tackle these challenges more efficiently. So there's a number of ways, as of 1:01 p.m. today, to continue to engage with Connexus, and this can all be done just by going on our website and clicking on About, and then hit Contact to sign up for any of these. But continue to engage with the Industry Exchange. This is not the only subject we will tackle. We will tackle many subjects over the coming years. The next one we will begin is focused around the talent development and talent alignment with digital adoption, and that will start here, I believe, in just the next 45 days. So attend another one of these. They're in person. They're also virtual. We're trying to get around the state as best we can, but we'd like to have the virtual ones to catch folks that we haven't been able to get in front of. Join the Advanced Industries Council. It's a 135-member organization comprised of advanced manufacturing logistics companies, the Lillys, the Cummins, the FedExes of the world, all the way down to multi-generation. I think we were on the call yesterday with one of ours that's a 5th-generation small manufacturer. So Indiana is dependent upon manufacturers and logistics companies of all sizes. So we'd like to make sure that all of you have opportunities to engage with the work. The Industry Talent Association. This is a deeper topic than 30 seconds here at the end, but one of the things as we're trying to support companies as they tackle a myriad of workforce issues is the Industry Talent Association, which reviews, refines, creates curriculum to help better prepare students at the secondary, post-secondary, and then adult worker level to meet the needs and to walk in your facilities with the skills necessary to contribute. That is dependent upon industry leaders stepping up and dictating, educating us on what you all are looking for. And last but certainly not least, nominate a Rising 30 honoree. There's a whole host of impressive, wonderfully talented people throughout the state. I'm sure that you employ or work with one of them, so please bring them to our attention. Next slide. Thank you to the IEDC for helping to sponsor this event and making the roadshow as well as these virtual sessions possible today. So thank you for their unwavering support. Next slide. And then again, last but not least, we do what we do because of how important advanced manufacturing and logistics is to the state. Indiana is the most manufacturing intensive state in the country. Indiana is more dependent upon manufacturing than Hawaii is tourism. So we are committed each and every day to making sure that Indiana continues to be a world leader in manufacturing, making sure that it is a great place to earn a career in either one of those industries, and that there is ample opportunity at all corners across the state. So thank you again for being with us. And Kelsey, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Bryce, and thank you all for joining. That will conclude today's session. We hope you're leaving today with valuable insights into technology and AI adoption implementation for your organization. If you have any follow-up questions or would like to learn more, we'll send a post-event email with all of the meeting resources. On behalf of the entire team behind this meeting, thank you again for your time. Take care and have a great week.